Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Let the Right One In. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, I think it's so interesting that this show is taking a more science fictional approach to vampirism, because I feel like that doesn't happen more. I mean, most things don't get into the nitty gritty of it, but maybe I'm not thinking of it. I'm sure maybe 30 Days a Night probably dived into it. I'm sure some of that ilk would. But like the most recent thing I can think of that really dived into it was the show Van Helsing on Sci-Fi, especially in the earlier seasons. Obviously, it's all kind of like supernatural magic type of stuff, but they really leaned into the science fiction of it, because at the beginning of that series, I mean, throughout it, still, vampirism was treated kind of like zombieism in that series. So it's the one thing I know that really leaned into it, using something like Vampire Diaries. I think there were moments where they used science to figure stuff out, but obviously vampirism in that universe is rooted in magic. So I just think I thought it was so interesting, especially with Claire's dad and everything, because I think it's an interesting parallel where you have Mark looking at this situation from, all right, let's find the host and find them so that we could, like, you know, create a cure from them, like antibodies or whatever. And Claire suggests that, but her father has tried that in the past, so he's more so trying to handle it from the science route. In the grand scheme of things, he is kind of a jackass for going to the lengths that he went to with Peter. It's like, couldn't you have tested the water a little bit? Like, he's so sure that he was right, that he's going to be the one to figure this out, that it is a situation of, oh, cool, I'm going to let my son be out here in broad daylight, like, get the full, every inch of the sun. You know, it's like, why would you do that? Why not, like, slowly ease into it? It's like, he was so sure. And he holds on to the fact, he's like, hey, he was out in the sun for 1 minute before he started burning. It's like, yeah, that's cool, but at the very least, you could have tested that, and now your son's covered in what would essentially be what, third degree burns or something like that of that nature. But either way, we kind of get more on Claire's father's side of things. Kind of this is also once again kind of leading into the science fiction of it all. We see monkeys infected with the vampirism, which immediately made me go like, oh, that feels like some like Resident Evil shit. Like, you know, the animals being infected and stuff like that. But it was kind of like crazy seeing like those monkeys, and even to the point that they are so driven by their instinct. Like that one monkey, like its leg was strapped down and it was trying to get after Claire so hard that it ended up ripping its own leg off. Like it didn't care. Once again, very like that. It was just interesting. Like it was almost like an uncontrollable zombies. Like zombies, like definitely work later, especially in the Walking Dead universe. Like they'll pull themselves apart. They'll just keep going along just because they're like, let me eat you. They're so driven by that. And even to the point it went back smelling its own blood and was licking it up before it died. I was like, which I thought was interesting. I guess because maybe they're not full vampires. So, because it looked like it did seem like it died. So it's like, right, like could a vampire even bleed to death? I just think that's so interesting. Like, I mean, maybe once again, like everything's kind of got its own rules and everything. Like this show introduced the fact is that, oh, vampires are in this universe are traditional vampires. We're like, oh, you need to be invited in. I only say that because once again, I say it like every other show I'm watching that's vampire related. I'm watching a few things at once, and different things have different rules. Like I think they just talked about in a previous episode of Reginald the Vampire that's not a thing in that universe, but you know that was them like playing with a very like cliche trope of like vampirism. Like it's a very classic vampire thing of like, yeah, you need to invite them in. So either way, but who knows what their like body chemistry is like. I don't know if like they have rapid healing abilities. Maybe not, because I mean, and maybe they need blood to repair themselves, and maybe those monkeys were starved, and obviously they can't feed on their own blood, so it ended up dying because it bled out, and it didn't. I don't know. Like it just literally passed out and died in its own blood. So I'm like wondering how that works. Like, could a vampire legitimately bleed to death? Especially because they went through the trouble of explaining the signs of. And I think it's so interesting using like because vampires have like this enhanced metabolism, that basically that they run through the oxidization of their blood. They run through it so quickly. That's why they need fresh oxidized blood to drink, to kind of replenish what they, it's like, obviously it's like their body like shifting to kind of compensate for that. So I thought that was, once again, just an interesting science explanation for how it works. And even that it basically reworks their brain so that they're basically constantly in a fight or flight mode, but more fight and flight. So it's basically like what, like adrenaline and stuff like that pumping through them. And I guess that maybe is supposed to be, maybe that's connected to like the superhuman strength and stuff, like maybe like kind of explaining that stuff in a more science way. But Claire was not too quick to jump on this whole situation, because it would mean abandoning everything. It would mean abandoning her life as she knows it. And she doesn't really know if she's willing to take all this on. Her dad's putting her in a position. It's like, right, I'm going to throw all this on you while I'm practically at death's door, because someone's got to continue this work, continue where I left off. But she's decided to do it not for her dad's sake, but for Peter's sake. It's like, right, she thought he was dead all these years. And they did specifically time frame it as 10 years ago. So Peter got changed at the same time Ellie did. And it does seem like they are completely unaware of each other, even though there's that photo. So it's like, right, like, why would either one, why would Claire and Peter's dad or Mark ever go public about their children's respective situations? Because it's like, right, we're not about to do that just for our children to be paraded around as monsters and experimented on. So, like, of course, they're going to keep it low-key. So, of course, they wouldn't even make any connection. It does make you wonder, does anyone else in that circle of people, like, has anyone else been bitten as well? Like, it just happens to be these two. And like I said, it also parallels nicely with what I brought up earlier about both of them taking very, like, different approaches to finding a cure. So it kind of lends itself to that aspect as well. But her dad was like, no. Like, the fact is, if you're going to take over everything, I need you to know the ins and outs. I need you to know, like, this is the most successful thing we've had so far. So I need you to kind of start from here and kind of continue on down this route. So. And then we also get Nick Stahl, who's playing Matthew, which I completely forgot he was introduced last episode. It's interesting because I made that reference of like zombieism. Like, the last thing I saw Nick Stahl in was season 6 of Fear the Walking Dead, so just zombie connection in that regard. But he's the way it did seem like her dad was kind of like hiding away from the topic of, well, how do you feed him? It's like, well, we know how Mark goes about it. So I was like, did you find another way? So Matthew apparently gives him some of his blood, but she's like, yeah, but when you don't have enough, it's like, yeah, we have a blood bank type of situation. And this is where we get into that really, really interesting part of, okay, so how much does her father actually know, and how much is like stuff that Matthew is just doing on his own? He had like her father has to know to some extent. Like, he probably is trying to ease her into this. So he was like, oh yeah, there's a blood bank thing, but it's probably like not unless that's a lie. And even like Matthew cleaned stuff up, so maybe her father was completely unaware what Matthew was up to. Because once again, that ties into the other. Like, I'm jumping around a little bit, but let's touch on the Mark thing a little bit. Like, he followed the address and ends up following the people back, and they go to like kind of almost like a storage unit or kind of warehouse type of place. And lo and behold, who's there? Who rolls up on him? Matthew. And you're like, okay. So, once again, does Claire's dad know about this? Because Matthew is connected to the drugs that are basically making people like vampires. So you're like, okay, is this his way of, testing the waters? Like, pseudo-infecting human beings to get a better idea of how it affects people. And that way you get a better idea of, like, maybe be able to isolate some of the similarities between people. That, or this is Matthew's side gig. I'm leaning more towards, I'm thinking it's Matthew's side gig. So it's like, maybe this is also how he finds the people he ends up feeding to Peter. Because this is the person that Claire's dad trusts the most. It's like, he's the only one that knows about Peter's circumstances. But now it's like, this whole thing could be a side hustle. Because, like, why else would you manufacture drugs that will make vampirism? Like I said, there is that part of me that's like, not unless this is Claire's dad's, like, thought of, like, testing it out on regular people. I mean, he's testing things on monkeys. That's why he decided to go, like, hardened the paint with the treatment he had given Peter and told him to walk out into the sun because he had tested it out on monkeys and everything was. It's like obviously he's desperate to save his son. There is an element of yes, I love my son. I'd do anything to save him. So because Peter's actually the one who told their dad not to tell Claire anything because like I didn't want to ruin another life. I already ruined Dad's life. He sacrificed so much on these past 10 years for me. I didn't want to do the same thing, but Claire's willing to do that for her brother's sake. But now she's kind of getting to see, because it's like, right, when she's talked to him, she's seen him in his condition, but now she sees like, oh my God, you're still my brother, knowing he's in so much pain, especially that her dad caused so much pain. And we really got into her dad's circumstances that he pushed like a painkiller that was supposed to be something that people wouldn't get addicted to, but people found a roundabout way to get super addicted to it. And it's like, when you found out about it, you didn't do anything. You kept peddling it. It's like, that's who you are. You don't cure pain. You give it to people, and it's like right what you did, like kind of like you've been always she chewed him out last episode of being not a good father, and now it's not only you haven't been a good father, you're not a good person in general. So, but like I said, she now got to see like the ugly side of the vampirism. Her brother's so uncontrollable that and it's like right, that's the reality she has to deal with now. She has to see what it can look like, the hunger when it controls them. They even went through the trouble of kind of explaining the vampirism eyes because it's like it's almost. I guess it didn't even correlate in my head that there is a particular reason for that. I made a reference to like another show that did a thing like that with vampirism when it shifted the eyes, like gave kind of the eyes like a very like specific view, like things kind of had like a very like glow to them, like with vampiric eyes. But now it makes sense. It's like right, you would need your eyes to be adjusted for nocturnal hunting, so it makes sense. It was just kind of neat that they went through the trouble of just kind of giving like a scientific like, explanation, like, oh yeah, like their eyes are like this. You know what it reminded me of? It kind of reminded me of Riddick. Like, because he kind of had like very similar eyes, and those creatures, like he copied their eyes that allowed, so it just, that's what immediately it made me think of, like specifically Pitch Black, because Pitch Black amongst the Riddick movies was the most horror-esque movie. So it definitely felt very similar in that regard. So I just, yeah. I am a big fan of the Riddick movies. I know, regardless, I was about to go down a tangent, it's not important, but that's what the eye situation immediately made me think of when I really thought about it, because, I just thought that was kind of neat. Like I said, just a neat little explanation for, like, understanding how that operates, and, I mean, it makes perfect sense why they would have that type of situation, so. But like I say, yeah, the ugly truth of, Matthew brings in people, once again, whether or not her father knew and he was just easing her into that, or whether that's just a Matthew thing, being like, hey, I just wanted your father to not, like, sometimes, like, I have to, maybe their blood bag situation fell through, so I had to find a different route. It was the only way, or maybe this was always the way, and once again, just trying to ease her into it. I'm so interested to find out Matthew's circumstances of, is the whole, like, drug thing something that her father's aware of, or that just like a side business. Well, we'll have to wait and see where the next episode kind of takes us with that. But obviously, because of this whole situation, going back to the mark of it all, him disposing of Frank's body was brutal. I mean, it makes the most sense, but I was like, jeez. I don't know why. Like, to me, it feels worse than like the like Breaking Bad, like bathtub situation. Like, it feels worse than that because it's like he broke his body just to fit it in that drum, and I don't know why that just bone breaking stuff just kind of bothers me the most. I don't know. I was like, I don't know why that got me so much that it's like, oh, you're bending his body and breaking. I mean, he's dead already, but still, and which is kind of horrible. And he's obviously praying because I think he is a very religious man. I mean, maybe they just come from a straight religious family because it seems like his wife was kind of similar in that regard. Speaking of his wife, it does seem like, at least with the way the episode set up, which I also didn't recognize, speaking of Nick Stahl being with, like, The Walking Dead, the actor who plays Zeke is Virgil from The Walking Dead, so I thought that was kind of like a neat little thing. I didn't even think about that last episode, that I did recognize that actor from The Walking Dead. Either way, it turns like there was this conversation about like, right, like, a friend will like let you borrow their car without question, or like a best friend would help you bury your body. He's like, I already did. And now like, the moment he referenced her, I was like, oh, um it might be Ellie's mom, which I'm like, if she ended up killing her own mom, that might be horrendous. That's got to be a lot to deal with. I'm assuming that was 10 years ago, kind of one of the main reasons why they left, because she is buried here. So you would assume like it happened around that time or something. That maybe that's extra reason why they left it. But probably like Zeke probably covered that up. I don't know. Maybe it's a situation. Well, I was like, the way they're implying it made it seem like Ellie did kill her, or maybe it could be she offered herself up to Ellie just to have her something to eat. Either way, that's got to be a lot of. If Ellie ate her mother, like, of course that's gonna make her feel a whole bunch of guilt, but also everything with her dad. She even said like last episode, like, right, you don't even look at me when I'm eating or drinking the blood because it just disgusts you so much, So we'll see whether there ends up being anything. There's even more layers to it when you add in the fact is because Zeke made it clear last episode he had a thing for Ellie's mom, but then like her and Mark got together. So, and you add in the fact is like once again him burying her body, but also they were talking to one of the chefs from the restaurant, and it turns out there's a very signature dish that Mark made. He was like, well, me and Zeke came up with it together because they were both pining over the same person. So I was like, oh, there's just once again adding a little texture and background to like some of their dynamic and what they've kind of been through to some smaller extent. So he even went to visit her grave, and that was this heartbreaking scene where he's like, he thinks he's so far down in the pits of hell because of what he's done that he thinks that even God, he's like, I need you, because he's like, obviously you're by the Lord's side, so I need you to like whisper in his ear, tell him, because like anything I say to him won't reach him because I'm in the pits of hell for what I've done. And he probably think because he knows that's where he's going after everything he's done, regardless of it's all been for their child's sake. It's still, I've done some very, very terrible things. Who knows what he's done in the past, but we know what he's done recently, and that was kill Frank. So, which Naomi got introduced to Ellie this episode, and I love that she kind of assumes the worst, like the way she was introduced to Ellie, and Ellie's like, yeah, I'm homeschooled, and it's like, oh, your dad showed up here, he didn't say anything about having a daughter. I mean, to be fair, they didn't have that much of an interaction, but it's like, oh, you just suddenly popped up here, aren't you getting ready for school? It's like, oh, I'm homeschooled. And she's immediately talking to her partner, being like, yeah, I think there might be something going on there, like she might be sex trafficked type of thing. I was like, Jesus. I mean, understandably so, but even he's like, yeah, you kind of look at the worst in people, and then they look at one of the dead bodies from like the most recent crime scene. He's like, okay, there's that, sure, but you still have a tendency to look at the worst in people. She's got a gut feeling about Mark. I mean, that legitimately is his daughter, but there is still something weird going on. But she made sure, given the opportunity, she asked a lot of questions. The fact is that Isaiah invited Ellie to like the performance, because who knows if she's had any friends over the past 10 years. So Isaiah might be the first person she's latched on to in all that time, or maybe it is a situation of she has had other friends but she's always had to move or something. I don't know. Once again, being around someone who's pseudo your own age. Once again, I bring up the fact that she's still like a 12-year-old, but she's technically 22 because of the whole vampirism thing. But she wants to go, and her dad's kind of telling her, you can't really do that. Like, you can't go without me. She made sure to sneak out, though. But like I said, Naomi took that opportunity to be like, you hurt your hand or whatever. What happened? It's like, yeah, and Ellie came up, because I guess it's like, right, you spent the last 10 years coming up with lies, you get pretty good at it. She probably knew immediately, like, someone might ask some questions, especially if she's in public, so. But Naomi's kind of, I mean, understandably so, you're kind of like, oh, you're assuming the worst, but you're like, right. You do want someone kind of like looking at a situation like, things kind of feel weird, things kind of feel off. So what's going on here, trying to get a better understanding. This episode also, well, we already knew that he's already getting bullied and stuff. And this episode really leaned into it. You're like, oh boy. Once again, the one thing I do remember from the original movie is like how, I mean, and I think this is true to even the book, is like the bullying stuff oh, dude, this is just the tip of the iceberg. They're going to go super hard in the paint on it, and it's going to be the most heartbreaking thing because you're going to be like, man, children suck. Children can be some of the biggest pieces of shit in the world just because, you look at Isaiah and you're like, man, that's a cool kid. And you look at those other kids and you're like, but it's like, 1 out of 5 kids you're just going to assume are not assholes. 1 out of 5 kids are Isaiahs who are cool, weird kids. I think maybe because I relate because I was that weird kid, I'm still that weird kid. I'm just now an adult. I'm just now a weird adult. But yeah, because I didn't have to, I was nerd. I've been nerdy since I was a kid. All I ever wanted to do was talk about Dragon Ball Z. I literally had 3 people I could talk to about Dragon Ball Z. And in elementary school, that's all I want. I'm granted he's in middle school, but still oh God, I was like, man, things got really rough with the bullying and stuff like that. And I'm just, oh, dude, I'm just, and, oh, God, it's like, oh, yeah, because I was scared when he was like, oh, he referenced that David Blaine trick where you bite off a piece of the coin and you spit and it's fixed. I was scared because I was like, oh, my God, they're going to make you bite down at the coin and they're going to fuck up your teeth but he's like, oh, try that trick. If you don't do it, I'm going to make you swallow the coin. He's like, oh, you're not going to do it? Cool, I'm going to take that coin. And considering, I think that's the one his dad gave him too, so that's extra fucked up. But I was also like, because I've seen the movie, spoilers, the bullies super get their comeuppance. Oh, they get it super hard. Oh, they get it. But if I remember correctly, that's kind of like the spoilers, the climax of the movie. So I'm curious, when that's going to happen in the show, considering, right, they're spending a lot more time on the build-up and stuff. So it's probably going to be a little while before the bullies get their comeuppance. But I wonder, because like I said, if I remember correctly, they got it super hard, it was visceral and bloody and really fucked up when they got their comeuppance in the movie. So I'm so curious to see if they go that hard in the paint in the show or not. I don't think I don't remember if I don't think they showed it. They a lot of it's noises and I think you hear stuff, but you don't ever see it on camera. At least I don't think when they got their comeuppance. I'm sure this show is not going to show that too. Because also for one, it's children, and the last thing you want to do is see some brutality like that. It's going to be super implied, and you're probably going to hear some noises and see a whole bunch of blood, but that's probably all you'll get from it. But it's going to be to the point you're just because they're just going to build that up into the point you're like, oh yeah, those kids deserve it. It sucks because they're kids, but it's also man, they are little shit. And unfortunately, they picked the one kid that a vampire latched onto. So shit out of luck, kids. But who knows? We'll see. They might even change it where it doesn't get that brutal. But like I said, to my recollection, once again from a movie I haven't seen in 15-ish years, I remember it being brutal, but I could be wrong. But either way, it sucks too because once again, Naomi's going to assume the worst in Frank. Oh, he didn't show. I said last episode she was going to think that because it's right, this is going to be your last chance. Hell, they even threw that in his face of oh yeah, one of the kids is yeah, I had to be nice to him because my mom said I had to because his daddy walked out on him. It's oh, why wouldn't he? Look at him. Oh, he's because he pissed in your bed. I can't believe you let that freak stay in your bed. It's yeah, you're going to get on stage and piss yourself. Oh, you want to piss yourself right now? Wait till you get on stage. I'm like, God, you are horrible. So either way, he goes on stage, and I do like that Ellie got his back, and is yo, I'll be your assistant. She's like, make me disappear, and they do it, and then she pops up behind, in the back of the stage. I was like, yeah, that's super speed, and everyone's like, whoa, that little girl killed me when she was that's some Houdini shit right there. I'm like, little girl, you are in middle school. No teacher's just going to let you say that. Granted, it's an auditorium, so, no one probably knows who said it. But come on, a teacher would jump on your ass so fast for, getting out of pocket like that, I just think I was just I thought that was the funniest thing, but it's also super unrealistic because a teacher, they were already jumping on all the kids for, interrupting Isaiah, but it's also, and all those bullies were steaming because they were look at him trying to be cool. Yeah, they were trying to embarrass him, but he came out looking super cool. In fact, he might even get a little more popular because of Ellie. And I do like them being able to hang out and everything. And it's just once again, it does feel like he's probably the first friend she's had in all these years. Someone, quote unquote, her own age. And Mark came and saw them playing, and for for him, because I think for him, it's like, for the first time in forever, she feels like just a normal kid. And then it's the thing of, yeah, let me just let her have her fun. And then the moment he starts looking around the apartment, I'm like, you're going to see a picture of Frank, aren't you? And it's like, oh, cool. Wait, that's Isaiah's dad. It's like, cool, cool, cool. I killed the father of my daughter's new friend. That's awesome. Oh, I'm a cook. What do you do? Because apparently she used to be a singer or something. She's like, oh, that's a different life. I'm an NYPD homicide detective. You're like, getting hit with the combos. Like, and I kind of wasn't expecting him to find out all this early. So that's definitely going to make the balancing act. I wonder, does he tell Ellie the truth? Because it's a lot to be like, yeah, the blood you fed on, yeah, that was kind of Isaiah's dad. So he's probably not going to tell her that just because of how, but he also knows, like, we're going to have to be extra careful because we got a homicide detective. I mean, granted, he's in one of those drums. Someone's going to find him eventually in that, like, warehouse or whatever. So we'll see. What's also complicated too is, like, Matthew had one of his boys, like, get the license plate from the car that Mark was in. Granted, it's not Mark's car, it's Zeke's. It is gonna, like, well, he's like, oh, I'm a driver and stuff like that, but then it's like, okay, he's gonna show up at Zeke's place looking for Mark, find out Mark's a chef, but it's still gonna be like, why were you lying? Why were you really there? So that's gonna complicate things. Oh, dude. Things are taking some very, very interesting developments, and I'm so curious to ultimately see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and good